So I think we're good to start. Are we good to start? That's okay if we do introductions for you? Let's do introductions. Okay.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm Lena Marks. I'm an assistant professor here at the University of Arizona College of Public Health. I'm the director of IndigiWellbeing, and thank you all for coming. I'm going to turn it over to Billy, since this seems to be kind of a student oriented conference, and Billy's going to take it away from here for the rest of the event. Thank you all.
Bom dia, Kineen. Nabi yawa yawa kawa we awata Nabi yawa kawa we pricing demo na okay we get mu. So hello everyone, my name is William Carson. I'm a third year doctoral candidate at the no, very new, so I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that yet. But the College of Public Health here at the University of Arizona. I study health behavior, health promotion, and Indigenous health under Dr. Marks over there. I'm also program coordinator for IndigiWellbeing, the program putting on this session here at ACES. So honored to be here, honored to be a part of it. And I want to introduce our honored guest today. So I have his bio right here, so I'm going to read this off for us. So Robert Kinneen was born in Petersburg, Alaska. He is an Alaskan chef of Tlingit heritage. After high school, he attended the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York. Post-graduation, he fine-tuned his skills in all facets of the industry while working at several prestigious restaurants around sourcing locally, in the country. Additionally, establishing his philosophies of sourcing locally and seasonally. Returning to Alaska, he focused on loyalty to Alaska aquaculture, farmers, ranchers, and artisans. This led to local, state, and national reviews and speaking engagements, as well as cookbook contributions in highlighting the local food while cooking with visiting chefs Jacques Pepin, Lydia Bastianich, and Steve Reichland. Embracing and learning more on traditional foods led to adventures in culture camps from Barrow to Bethel, smelt with salsa, to Tyanek, foraged beach peas, and stika, rockfish fried rice with foraged greens. Furthermore, cooking nationally and around Alaska, promoting wellness and highlighting and eating locally with speaking engagements and private caterings. Career highlights include being featured on the Today Show with Al Roker cooking spot shrimp, fresh rolls, and spruce tip marinated elk skewers, highlighting Alaska regional cuisine, and cooking at a 12-person house party in 2015 for Barack Obama, while he visited the state to witness the effects of climate change. And in 2022, he joined Natives as the outreach director, where he works with Indigenous curated events. So, honored to have Robert Kinneen here.
Good look, Mags.
You got this,
Everything's great. So I just want to say thank you all. First of all, it was nice to be here. This is fantastic. It's been great. And the only sad thing is that it's so quick. So I'm leaving tomorrow. But I really want to come back because the food here has been really amazing to kind of delve into, understanding some of the traditions. And I was mentioning this earlier, but this fall I went to Mexico for an arts envoy trip, and that was I got to go to Sonora, so kind of the southern meat of this. So to see a lot of familiar foods, but also just in a different landscape has been really interesting. So I am almost set up. Thank you for your patience. And what I want to do is really just kind of share a little bit about my culture, and then the exciting part about this is that I also kind of consider myself an internal student, so I get to also learn about the areas that I travel around. Billy, I apologize. Am I doing the presentation first or the food demo first?
Oh, presentation.
Brilliant. So good. So we're ready to go. So I have this presentation. So I'll start with that. All right, so again, North American traditional indigenous food systems. Okay. yeah, we got a good little intro and a rundown on that, and I'm gonna kind of go over some of the work that I've done, some of the, what kind of brought me to this place, and also where I'm kind of going. And that said, so in 2008, I think, I did a film release for, a video called, For the Rights of All. For the Rights of All was about the Indigenous civil rights movement, which actually predates the national movement by 20 years. Elizabeth Barakovich was one of the main catalysts, and she fought discrimination in the state of Alaska. Actually, it was the premier civil rights bill. So what that brought me to the National Museum of American Indian in Washington, D.C. For a food presentation. One of the things that I saw was this, it was called Skating on the Res, and gentleman, Jim Murphy is he's American native. He was a Bones Peralta skater like from the 70s, and he started looking at positive messaging and started putting that on skateboards. Today, he's traveling around the country, working on reservations with Wounded Knee and Stronghold Society, and focusing on the positive aspects. First of all, it's like it's physical well-being. And then, you know, instead of saying, hey, don't do that, it's like, hey, you know what? You're gonna skate a lot better sober than you are on these things, smoking that or drinking this. So it's really positive messaging without being like, don't, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, let's keep it positive. And also the messaging on the skateboards is really positive as well, and talks about history and tradition. That kind of hit me a lot because like, I didn't really grow up super traditionally. I didn't grow up doing a lot of hunting with my uncles, working with my family. We moved from Southeast Alaska up to Anchorage, which is in the state, but it's miles away. I'll get into that in a minute. And that was really, really interesting. So I think for me, it was like looking at the value of how I can be an asset to my community, but also not in the sense of like being a traditional quote unquote, you know, drummer, singer, dancer, or whatever, which is not invalid. It's just, I need to also focus on that. Huh. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. It seems like blinking. Yeah, really. Sorry. Issues with technology. So kind of backing up, like talking about where I come from. I was born in Alaska, Alaska. I was born in the Southeast, which is down here. If you were to take Alaska and cut it in half, Texas would be the third largest state in the country. So we've got 6 different regions and over 250 different tribes. So all right. But focus on, you know, from like Utagawa or Vero, which is basically, it touches the Arctic Ocean. And then the southwest or southeast, these Aleutian Islands are basically, they're volcanic islands, just like Hawaii, but obviously in the Bering Sea, so northern region. So a very diverse landscape. And as we kind of mentioned, like some of the highlights that I've gotten to do, working with Al Roker on the Today Show, talking about traditional foods, or being handpicked to cook for President Obama at a house party featuring all indigenous foods. One of the kind of bigger experiences I've had, you know, the diversity of the state. So this is a picture right here, hopefully, of it's called Palm Island. So this is in Barrow, Alaska, or Utagawa. And if you look at it, does anybody know what baleen is? Yeah, what's baleen?
It's in the whale, and so it chapters the small food that it eats.
Right.
Also, I'm thinking that, so.
Oh, beautiful.
I'll go.
Awesome. We're probably related. I'm just kidding.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's from Petersburg.
Oh my gosh, we probably are related. So this was taken, that picture was taken, it was like -35. And it's called the Week of Healthy Living. So basically, the sun goes down November 21st. And the days are like sunset. So what you saw there was like this, what you see for months. And we were there to kind of recapture, reset the body. Just kind of, you know, in the sense of like your days are, not only are they like sunsets, but they're like 4 hours at one point. So like you're literally just looking at a sunset for 4 hours for months. So I went up there and we took a picture, or we did a, in the school, you know, I did a cooking class. There was other health and wellness pieces to kind of recalibrate the system. But Palm Island, so it's -40. There's this, you know, these trees, and they staple baleen onto it to make it look like palm trees. And this is in a fish processing camp and whale processing camp, out the road a little bit. So this was the first thing I did, and it was muktuk sushi. So the University of Alaska, Fairbanks, they have I can't think of they have a class where they do sprouts. So like we did local sprouts, and then you know, the muktuk. And the funny part was that the weird thing for everybody up there was the nori wrapper. What is this stuff? But this was just kind of a way to kind of present traditional foods in a way, in a new way, to kind of make it, you know, make it a little more interesting. On the flip side, this is Sitka, Alaska, Southeast. I'm Tlingit, Southeastern Alaska native. I was born in Petersburg. My grandfather was from Sitka. So this area is just really special to me. And it's actually the rainforest, and it's usually 70 degrees because you've got the Japanese current coming through with the ring of fire. So it's always just like 70, it's beautiful. That's Mount Reed out in the back. No, it's not. I can't think of the mountain of the volcano. But the volcano in the background there, that's very symbolic of the state of the area. And obviously these aren't traditional foods, but you know, this one woman that we go to for this festival, she just had like a block of garden that she would work with. So it's really kind of fun to be there, but also in a rainforest, you just see, you know, there's berries in the summer, there's you know, shrimp in the winter, there's just food all around all the time. Versus Barrow with the Gavik, where it's frozen for 5 months out of the year, so you have to kind of work around foraging and food sourcing is different. One of the things I used to talk about was like, for me, traditional versus contemporary. So right now, and I actually have some as a gift to anybody that's interested, we have some herring eggs. Those are just super sacred and super special for Tlingit people. Down here, this Alaskan caviar was a herring roe that they were doing, kind of like a Tobiko caviar. So kind of the idea of like looking at traditional foods in a new light and making it a little more accessible or understanding for people that didn't grow up eating them. That was something that was very interesting for me and some of the work that I was doing. So this was an event I did, Alaska Pure Sea Salt, fantastic people that actually get Sitka Sound seawater and then they'll smoke it, spruce tips, blueberries, like all these unique Alaskan flavors. And to me, that's the thing as a chef, like when I travel somewhere, I would say like you can travel the world, eat at a Sheraton, have an omelet for breakfast, they go see the pyramids or this or that or Stonehenge. But for me, like I love traveling places and eating like the local foods and checking things out and understanding it. Doesn't mean you have to love it, just try it. So, you know, Alaska sprouts, that's kind of a contemporary way to bring a good food source to rural Alaska. There was a cocktail sauce that I made with local ingredients, the herring roe, and then that's a scallop finish and a king crab piece, and then garnished with that. So one of the pieces that I was also working on was in Tyonek, and you know, Anchorage is 300,000 people on a city. You get in a little Cessna 161 or whatever, and you go over the inlet and you land on a gravel strip of stretch, and they take off and nobody's there, and somebody shows up in a truck a minute later. 500 people. So this is one thing. This was a salmon stream before the 60s, and the Army Corps of Engineers came in and they put in these culverts because they wanted to build a road out the way. So that was great. Well, this was the original salmon stream. They redirected the stream through these two culverts, which are probably 6 foot. This is like 30 foot or 21 foot. And every few years, first of all, the salmon stopped running because they couldn't get up, they couldn't cross through the culverts. Because it was just like that much water through there, right? So what they did, the tribes actually did this as a food sovereignty movement. They bought a 21-foot culvert. They dropped it down about 8 feet into the water to kind of stimulate the stream and have enough water flow there. And it's actually on the original stream bed. This went off the side. And then they built the road back over it. And what that did was it brought salmon back to their sourcing. So they were coming up the inlet and to spawn for the summer. They stopped doing it for 30 years, and they've actually brought salmon back up to this area. Tyonek, by the way, 500 people. It's across the inlet, so you can't drive there. You have to fly there, or you live there. It's a $200 ticket, so it's not like you can just Uber to town and get something. A lot of things come over, and when you say come over, it comes over as a shelf-stable product. You know, so again, when you talk about food value, that's sometimes not the most nutritionally beneficial. I got involved with Tyonek because they built these hoop houses, and they started growing fresh vegetables as a way to kind of create, you know, good nutrition. And then they're like, we don't really know what to do with it. So they brought me out there and I got to work with them a little bit. And it was really funny because like they had corn growing, and the first year I went out there is like 4 heads of corn. It's like it's Alaskan, right? But the third year I went out there, they actually had like enough corn to give away to everybody because they kind of put it in the back and moved it. So it's not, again, super traditional, but it's also just kind of ways to work around the system. So this is something I made at the end of the culver ceremony for the summer. Everything on this, except for salt, pepper, and oil, is from Taiwan. So all the vegetables were there, the salmon was caught, not on that culver, but in a different one. Kind of a representative of what could be Alaskan food. And again, this is not traditional, so, but these are. And when you go out to Tyonik, again, you land on this gravel strip of road and you look out there and they're talking about food security. And you know, these are beach peas, they grow all over the beach. And you just pop them open, you can eat them fresh, you can saute them quickly, add them to any kind of stuff. There's fireweed tendrils, there's spruce tips, there's all kinds of food all around. And to me, it was kind of like, why aren't we we're only valuing things that get flown up here, we're only valuing things that get, you know, after we build a 2x4 and wrap it in Bisqueen, that's where we value our food. Why aren't we valuing these traditional foods? So this is, you know, some of the stuff that we have been working with and looking at. Anybody know what devil's club is? It's awesome to run into. It scratches you up really good when you're running down the hill as a kid. So, but it's also, while it's kind of something that's, you know, you have to be careful of, when you dig up the root, there's medicinal qualities in it. These are blossoms from the spruce tips, and they're kind of like menthol-y, and they're just like wonderful. And they're also known as Tlingit aspirin. So that's again something that you would get for anti-inflammatories and issues. These are called Indian asparagus. These are fireweed tendrils. So again, in the summer, you'll have, or again, this food just goes really quick. So there's like a 6-week time frame where it's around. And then once it grows, it'll get 6 to 8 feet tall and they start blossoming. And the kind of cool part is like it'll, you know, the last top will be here, and the blossoms start coming from the bottom up to the top. So there's a point where like if you have say 3 or 4 blossoms happening, and then you count, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to the top, on average, that's telling you in 6 weeks it's gonna snow. So not only is this food in the sense of like, and it's, you know, I was doing this, I mountain bike all the time, and it's like, all right, we've got a few, you know, it's gonna be early snow this year. Oh, it's gonna be a late snow this year. Literally, you're finding, so like, it's not only nutritional medicine, but it helps you navigate your world. And I just thought it was really special. So we'll get back to that a little bit later. This is the Southwest. So again, like this is Bethel, Alaska, it's the YK Delta, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. It's a glacial retreat. It's actually the size of Ohio, this area. So this is kind of fun because I fly into Bethel on a 727, 737. Then you get an Cessna and you go out to these little places. But I always wanted to go back to these villages in the wintertime, because in the wintertime you drive on these. Like people drive in snow machine and 4x4 out here. And you know, every once in a while you lose a truck, but I guess that's the cost of doing business. One of my farmer heroes is out there and he grows cold climate farms. So he's actually he was at this point, this is years ago, but he was growing probably 100,000 pounds of produce, I want to say. And he was exporting produce from Bethel. But again, like cold winter climate, using like fish, he'd get hooligan or just byproducts like fish, dry it, grind it, fold it into his topsoil. And then the cold climate harvesting is basically, so it, you know, it's going to be like 45, 50 degrees, 60 degrees in the summer. It's not super hot out there, but you kind of have your raised bed, you have a kind of a light felt. That will be like, you know, 45, so that's going to be 55 degrees. And then one of these is 65 degrees. Another hoop will be 75 degrees. And you can start growing greens and getting vegetables started when it's like 40 degrees out, because you've kind of created a warmer environment for your product. And again, I just kind of think about this in the sense of like using technology, and not that this is computer science or anything, it's just literally manipulating your environment to kind of make it work for you a little bit. But this is with contemporary foods. All right, what did I just do? Oh, okay. So that was kind of a rehash of what I had been doing. In 2015, I moved to North Carolina because there was a lot of stuff that was passion-based, but it wasn't really paying the bills. And if I was going to be a working chef. I moved to North Carolina, moved back to North Carolina. But I still do contract work once in a while, and when I did one event, I got a hold of North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems. And so it was a contract that turned into a job interview. And I was hired as the outreach director. So I call myself a recovering chef. I've been working in restaurants since I was 14 years old, went to culinary school at 18. So from 20 until now, I'm holding on to late 40s. I'm turning 50 this June. So I keep saying late 40s, even though it's like 2 months away. It's a whole different ballgame. As you get a little older, I feel very fortunate that I get to not only do something that's very passion-based for me, but also, cooking is a young man's game, as they say, younger person's game. So it's nice to use all that food knowledge and past, but also apply it in a different facet, hopefully for the next few years. So under NATIF, North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems, is the food lab, Indigenous Food Lab, I'm sorry. So phase 1, 2020, we actually have an urban location in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's at the global, oh my gosh. Now I can't think of, so we've got the food lab, it's in Minneapolis, it's on Lake Street. And it's actually kind of a food hall. So there's a lot of different places, that do serve food from around the world. And we're there. So we do, we're working on a place, we have Indigenous vendors, we have Indigenous kitchen techniques. Part of the food philosophy with NATIF's Indigenous Food Lab, we have a flagship restaurant called the Wamni that was started off as a private enterprise that Sean had purchased or had sold back to the Indigenous Food Lab. So it's actually a training center. It's called the Wamni. That restaurant is pre-contact, meaning like all the foods, you walk into this restaurant, it's a $5.5 million a year restaurant. And again, as a chef, it's a mind bender because you walk in and like, there's no dairy, there's no butter or cheese or cream. There's no beef, there's no pork chicken, there's no refined flour, there's no all-purpose flour, no refined sugar. So you have, well, geez, what's left, right? Bison, turkey, they have corn, like all heirloom corn. They're doing nixtamalization process with arepas and house-made tortillas, and they're doing sell about 5 pounds of crickets a week. Like crickets don't weigh that much, right? So it's kind of cool that they're actually working with all these indigenous foods and normalizing this cuisine. So that's kind of what's happening. And part of my job is also right now I'm kind of negotiating areas in Bozeman, Montana, Alaska, South Dakota, and Oklahoma. So as like the next steps for these indigenous food labs. And the idea is to have these, we're not building a Chipotle or a franchise, we're building a food lab, and those food labs need to represent the areas that they are in. So we're going to be working with the indigenous tribes. We're not trying to come in over the top and change things. We're trying to lift all the boats. And kind of like raise everybody up and honor traditional foods, honor these traditional items. And on top of that, look at it like let's look at bison, for example. They were almost extinct and now they're coming back. So how do we continue as if the food, acknowledging that disruption in the foods, but also how do we take this into the future? So it's pretty exciting. For those of you that don't know, Sean Sherman, he's the founder. He goes by the Sioux Chef, S-I-O-U-X. He's Lakota Sioux, and he's been, Awani was getting national and international accolades. He was actually deemed one of the 100 most influential people of the world in Time Magazine last year. So it's pretty exciting to see not only what he does, but to be a part of it as well. And on the other side, coming soon, this is an antiquated photo, so I have to get a bit of a picture. But where this sign is, there's actually a full marketplace. We sell 50 or 60 different indigenous food items solely in that marketplace. The Spirit Kitchen is off to the side there. And then there's the Media Kitchen where I just got there doing like 12 videos focusing on Alaskan subsistence foods. So it's pretty exciting to kind of see all this happening. This is something, part of it's called the Arts Envoy program for the United States. I went to Iceland and we talked about circumpolar food, security, and food sovereignty. It's kind of an anomaly because Iceland doesn't actually have an indigenous people. But we were there, Sheila Flaherty, she's doing amazing work in Canada. This gentleman, I can't remember his name, he works at a restaurant called Ox. He's BIPOC and he's working in a Michelin star restaurant. He owns a Michelin star restaurant in Razorback. And then off to the side here is kind of again, the idea of what would this local food movement look like? And so, those are clams. You get up into these circumpolar areas, and this is dried halibut. So it's just, it's wafery. I just kind of chopped it up. Sugar kelp, smoked dulse, so the smoked seaweed. It's like my new favorite thing. It's amazing. Sea truffle, which I had never really heard of, but that's kind of like another, I guess it's a fungus, but it's kind of a seaweed. Lovage and yarrow are two items that I've never seen in a place where you can purchase it. You can gather them in northern climates, but I've never seen them where you can go and buy yarrow or buy lovage. So I basically had boiling water and I just kind of pushed all this stuff into the pot. And what came out was this beautiful, like, there's like hints of smoke, hints of umami, hints of like, the minerality of the sea from the kelp, and then like the dried, the richness of like a halibut, but it wasn't like a halibut dish. And to me, that's celebrating local flavor. That's celebrating, an item and looking at it and thinking about where we're at. A lot of the stuff we also do is focus again, not on where food was, but where food can be. So in Alaska, I work with a dear friend who runs a subsistence and donation program with the Alaskan Native Medical Center. And so she does a lot of work where I always say, Rob Kinneen, city native, gets hit by a bus. I go to the hospital and I want, a turkey sandwich and soup. Rob Kinneen, like rural native, gets, shoots himself in the foot seal hunting, and I want moose burger and fish head soup. So she actually, with this subsistence program, can do fish head soup, seal stew, but it's all through donations. So she has to acquire the soup there. She does purchase some items. You can't purchase sea mammals. So she'll do donation programs. She'll buy seaweed. She buys things that are in budget. So like rockfish, for example, is a traditional food that's in the marketplace. But this is it's called the NASA Space Lab, and so it's an aeroponic program, and this is Labrador tea. So again, Labrador tea is a little more available. It's around, but you have to be in it, and it's not really close to Anchorage. You have to be in rural Alaska to get it. So this is the way to kind of have access to these traditional foods, but also use it in a way that's like honoring it with indigenous knowledge, but also kind of working with it in a system where we can have it a little more available. And they're also working on this with like, as I was talking about, fiery tendrils and other indigenous foods. So I just think that's a great way to again look at how we can use technology to kind of move some of this forward. This was an event, I'm actually gonna be going back up to Oregon again, but we did a beautiful week in Lane County, which is in Eugene, Oregon. So this is part of the feast, and these were all king salmon that we cooked over a fire. Another thing I got to do, I was in Mexico. So this was for Dia de los Muertos. I got to work with this culture bearer. She's a Mayan culture bearer. So she was showing us how to put together this dish. I wish I could tell you more about it, but my Spanish is fine. So, but it was amazing to work with her and kind of again seeing these foods and seeing these items. This is interesting. This was in Guanajuato, and again working with a kind of a culture bearer, but I can't say it in Spanish. I forgot, but ant eggs, prickly pear, tunas, and then different it's not hibiscus, but it's another flower that they were making teas with. So it's really fun working with these traditional foods. And one thing that kind of happened, this is kind of crazy, but like growing up in Alaska, I have friends, again, I'm in my late 40s, and I have friends that are my age, and we were talking, they're triplets, these three sisters. They have a mom, and they're like, yeah, my mom was born pre-contact. I was like, that's like, she's about 80, they think, but she was born pre-contact. And she remembers the first time she saw somebody with blue eyes because her uncle or a family member put her in a kayak, took her across a lake, and was picking her up to give her to somebody. And he wouldn't explain anything, and she put up such a fuss. He's like, just take her, it's okay. But she had blue eyes, he had blue eyes, and she thought that she was looking through his soul to the sky behind him. And on the counter side of that, so to say that in Alaska, there's people born pre-contact, and then like, I was going to Mexico, or I work with the Lumbee Nation, and it's like, 600 years of contact. So pre-contact is, 600 years ago, 500 years ago, but pre-contact foods are, so there's traditional foods that are pork or goat or cheese. But it's just, for us, it's an interesting thing to kind of look at again, when I start looking at how do we address this? It's not a one fit answer across the whole Turtle Island, right? There's a lot of varieties. Community outreach, I got to work with a lot of different schools. Some were private, some were public. This was a VOTEC school, so that was kind of fun. And then one thing that I'm kind of finding myself doing is a lot more policy work. So this was the White House Tribal Nations Summit, and we got to do 2 days of pre-contact foods, box lunches for 500 people a day. And then we did a 150-person welcoming ceremony for Secretary Holland. So Crystal Wapapa, who probably needs no introduction, she's amazing. This gentleman, Joe Robbins, was just nominated for a James Beard Award for his place in he works at a brewery in Maine, which is not traditional, but he's gets to work on his traditional food aspect with, you know, I like to pull him into things. And then these two chefs are from Menominee, Wisconsin. They're caterers and they work with the FPPIR program. But hearing about policy changes, and then I actually just got a chance to do this at the George Washington Institute with the Global Food Institute, George Washington University at the Global Food Institute. And, you know, so this, again, going back to policy, it's, you know, the federal government buys 6.2, it was pre-COVID, it was 6.2, so that's like $8.3 billion in food a year. What's the bargaining on that? The lowest common denominator is cheap. Like, what's that gonna help, right? So if we could focus on something like, you know, we talk about the 638 or the FDPIR program, food distribution program for Indian reservations. You know, I did a video in 2015 and I served seal pozole up in Alaskan, the Bering Sea. And nobody knows what hominy is or pozole, but I was working with what was there. Just like Alaskans don't really care about catfish, right? So how can we regionalize this and make this work? And through the 638A Self-Determination Act, you know, that's kind of the leveraging for that. So again, like, okay, bison is in there, but none of the bison is tribally sourced because no tribes have the sourcing to get the quantity of bison that you would need to feed all of Turtle Island in these boxes. So this is a great way to kind of make change. On a personal note, I got to meet Jose Andres. He's the guy that runs World Central Kitchen. Was really exciting. And as this is kind of a STEM class, and we're talking about items like technology and all this. This is I was just in Juneau and I got a chance to walk through the museum, the state museum there. And again, Alaska is very grand and very varied. Along the Aleutian Islands, the Aleuts live there. And this is something that they built. So these are gut skin parkas. And again, when you start talking about, you know, being out there, it's not like Hawaii, not that Hawaii is like, it's an island paradise, but it's also a warmer climate. So it's a cold climate, choppy, ocean bearing, and these people not only existed, but they prospered out there for years. And this was some of the stuff that they would do. If you look, you know, at this, it's like not only are they, you know, ornate, but they're sewed together. So it's gut skin, so it's been cleaned and then put together and then sewed to the point where it's actually watertight. So they can be ocean bearing and live. So this is, you know, they would have skin, so they would do the same thing. They would tan seal hides and use that as the kayak covers. All of this is, again, it's like technology that I think about. You know, I always think like technology is always thought as futuristic, but you never think about, well, how did these people come up with this thought process and make this happen? It's really eye-opening. This is not a great picture, but it's a birch skin canoe. That's more Athabascan. So imagine being on a river and the only thing separating you from that river is birch skin. It's really, really kind of awesome. This is it's a fish pallet, or it's called a poke. So they would store food in it, but it's a fish, it's cured fish skin. So again, that's how they would hold food, usually dry it or smoke it, soak it in seal oil, ligand grease, and then have it in something like this and have it available. And then again, like this is a cedar mat, and I have a cedar hat. The kind of cool part about that is like, it's just, if you look at the ornate, I don't know, I just think about patience of doing this kind of stuff, and it's fascinating because I would freak out after about 7 minutes. But you know, somebody with a lot more patience than me could do something like that, or the cedar hats, for example. And again, technology or not, when your cedar is dry, it tightens up, it dehydrates, and it opens up so there's a cool breeze. If it's raining, like it does in a rainforest, the cedar, it swells and it becomes waterproof, so the water will run off it. I just love these kinds of examples. These are ulus. And normally if you see them now, there's usually something ornate for the handle, wood or bone, and it's metal. But you know, pre-contact, or these are, I don't know how old they are, but this is held together with like you know, maybe it's a sinew or something. This is slate that's been sharpened and then a handle. So eventually this is gonna break and they could just open it up and make a new one. And I have a bone like that where it's like I'm left-handed, it feels good to hold that. And this is kind of more utilitarian, but that's like cleaning, chopping, processing. And then again, chilcat robes. I think about looming something like this, and it's just so, I have other pictures that are really amazing. And then that's a cedar bentwood box. So not only is it the carving and the technique of that, but it's also the time to manipulate a long plank of wood, steam it, and then bend it, steam it and bend it. Just kind of fascinating. My grandfather's from Sitka. So when I go to the Sitka State Park, you know, it's not like, oh, my grandparents were born in this house. It's like, I'm from like this land, you know? So you're looking at the berries, you're looking at the birds with the eggs, and you're looking at the seaweed on the coast, and you know, there's a creek that goes around the back. If you had time in a rock, you could get fish. But that's all the Tlingit, the original the village of Sitka. This is a battle helmet. It's the Katlyan, who's the Tlingit war chief. And in 1799, the Russian fur traders came up through the Aleutians, Kodiak into southeast. And by that time, the Tlingits were like, nah, we don't need to deal with you. So they pushed them out. In 1803, I believe, they had another battle and they lost. So that was the helmet that he was wearing at the time. It's a raven, if you look at it. And this is what the whole traditional setup would look like. This is it's called a tina, or a crest. This is ceremonial with copper, but these could actually deflect bullets. It's cedar and the way it was held in. And then they had a neck guard, and then this piece is where the eyes would be, and then they would have this. So again, imagine it's like the late 1800s, it's dark out, and you're looking at this like 6'5" kind of person coming at you. It's just amazing. But I think about this, you know, with the resilience and the fortitude that Indigenous people had, because basically from like 1804 to when Alaska was purchased by the US as a territory, it's 1849, 1850, they had to live outside of their own community and battle and deal with this. And it was never giving up. It was just 40 years of things are going to be changing. And then again, I got to go on I was on a seal and a whale hunt, and it was a food intervention, they called it. And you know, intervention means we're going there to fix something. And these rural areas, 2 rural areas, 500-person villages, highly dependent on subsistence foods. And I realized, like, I shouldn't, you know, we're showing up and we're feeding them for a couple days, and that's great, but what's the end result of that? And for me, this was kind of where I look at it and think, like, just because things aren't working out, it doesn't mean everything is broken or worthless. There's a lot of value if you look back at traditional well-being. I mean, we're out on the Bering Sea, seal whale hunting, brought them back to this island, and you know, you're out there on a boat, maybe there's 2 boats, and then you come back and you're looking at 15 or 16 boats and 40 people, you know, preparing their village, and getting them ready to take care of them for the winter. Because again, this is the Bering Sea off the Seward Peninsula. So in a very short amount of time, this is going to be covered with snow, and there's really not going to be gathering food. So I think it's just, for me, I look at it like, again, the idea, like, just fixing doesn't always mean giving. It means learning too. So, you know, I kind of take a moment to also try to make sure that I shut up and learn when I go somewhere. And I'll talk about that in this food presentation next. And I want to be an influencer, so follow me. And that's what I've got. So I don't know, are we doing questions now? Or are we gonna do a food thing?
Are you able to do questions while we're doing the food prep?
I can do one.
Okay, so, all right. You want to ask a question? Follow it. You don't have to follow it, but I would. So. Yeah, so what do you need help with for getting things set up. Do you want to talk about the what we're going to do?
Yeah, I'll talk about that real quick. First, again, there's not a picture, it didn't happen, right, guys? 1, 2, 3. All right. With this, I'm gonna pass this around. And I'll kind of go over everything here first. The Alaskan side, I'll talk about, we've got Alaskan salmon. Just due to restrictions and like in this environment, it's kind of hard to cook and everything, so I prepped it up ahead of time. I took this, I took it, I just kind of portioned it. Very simple with salt and cedar, and then pan seared it. I'm going to actually do a little a chaga and Labrador tea smoke on it. Maybe so, fire alarm, we'll see. And then, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but chaga, you've got a birch tree. Birch tree loses a limb, just like if you get a cut, you get a scab, right? So there's this scab that forms on the birch tree, and that's what chaga is. So it's called a mushroom. You're not gonna eat this stuff. But you can make a tea with it, and I've just heard all these benefits of chaga. I mean, when you talk to people, and especially like Athabascan, so like so interior up by Fairbanks or down kind of in the southwest, sometimes ceremonial smoking, but a lot of tea supposedly fights cancer. It's very antimicrobial, it's hugely beneficial. This is sea lettuce, and this is not from Alaska, but it's, you know, and I've got some seaweed that I'm gonna pass around or offer up if anybody would like some. Labrador tea, again, like antimicrobial, great for opening up the lungs and the nose if there's some, you know, if you're sick. I've got some cedar leaves here that we're gonna grind up, and then when I talk about like indigenous knowledge, so like spruce tips, you know, in Alaska, when the explorers would come up and they're like, you know, indigenous people look and you got the open sores, you got the bloody gums, you got the thing you need to drink this tea. It's scurvy. So like they would fight scurvy with vitamin C, and they knew that they didn't know it was scurvy, they didn't know they were nutritionally depleted, but they knew that if they drank this, it would get it back. So obviously told them. You know, so I just love thinking about those stories and thinking about, again, the way that, to me, indigenous knowledge, you know, it's working with your environment. Like you can be up in Barron and be like, ah, this is lame, it's cold a lot, it's hard to get the food. You know, there's 6 months of winter, and there's like, you know, 4 months of like dark, like literally night. But people existed and prospered all through the state of Alaska and all through Turtle Island, based on manipulating the environment, working with the environment to get what they needed. And I just think there's a lot of stories to be told that are really fascinating. So I'm gonna pass this around. You guys can chew on it, touch it, poke it, whatever. And then what I'm doing is making a vinaigrette. And I'm kind of taking everything I just talked about in that story and making a vinaigrette with that. So you know, again, like with natives, going back to the food philosophies, we try to work with big contact foods as best we can. If I was doing something like this again in this area, I might be using epizote, yerba santa, you know, hola santa, and then I'd probably be using agave. I have honey, apple cider vinegar. We just try to use vinegars that would be processed here, and then we try to usually use sunflower oil, and that's just because neutral taste and something that again could be processed locally or on for a lemon. So I've got a couple different things going on here. So the vinaigrette, I'll put that together, and your basic thought processes for vinaigrettes are 1/3 vinegar, like 3 parts, 1 part vinegar to 3 parts oil, and then emulsifier, mustard. I'm using Dijon. You could use dry mustard, you could use French's yellow mustard, and then usually you need a little sweetener to balance that out a little bit because you've got high acid. You don't want to go too heavy on mustard, but the mustard will emulsify it, meaning like you've got acid and then the oil, and you know you kind of want that to kind of bind to it, and that will create a mouthfeel. And then the other thing, I've been doing this, and I call it a jam jar vinaigrette because I started making a lot of vinegars at home. Well, first of all, I started buying a lot of vinegars at home. I was like, geez, this is kind of expensive, right? And then you realize like you've got all the stuff you need. So I would basically just get vinegar. I would make my own vinegar, and I'd have like a little jam jar. So again, like, you know, you could get an 8-ounce jar, fill it up 1/3 of the way, 2/3 of the way, you have 6 ounces of vinaigrette. And, you know, you could just shake it, you know, breaks up, you kind of shake it up, emulsify it, use it, put it away, pull it back in a day or two, keep it over a week. But that way you're not buying a bunch of, you know, my in-laws go to wholesale clubs and get like 48 ounces of, you know, ranch dressing or something, because like, you guys are 2 people. So that's a good way to kind of have this. You can make a variety. You can use, you know, indigenous ingredients, or in my household, my wife is allergic to garlic, for example. You can't really buy anything without garlic in it. So making your own vinaigrettes is very easy. So that's kind of one piece here. Actually, I'll just do that real quick. Again, I'm gonna open it up if there's any questions, because I'm kind of tired of hearing myself talk, so.
Does anybody have questions while we prepare like the sampling?
So I now know, like, there's an openness, right, to Indigenous food sovereignty and just, you know, being open to the whole idea of, being more respectful to land and people. But early on, you know, did you find that there was resistance to that, and that there was, maybe even, just pushback, right, from people who didn't want to share the knowledge, or maybe even people who weren't necessarily wanting to receive it? And I'm just curious what your experience was around that.
That's a great question, and also, Sean Sherman, the founder, I mean, we'll be doing an event, and they're like, we want to be open source and transparent with our food and with our ideas, but also, like, you know, we were talking to one entity, and they're like, this is our corn, we don't want you guys touching our corn. Okay, no problem, don't worry, we'll not touch your corn. The same thing, I mean, so like, I'm gonna offer this up, and this is I just got a chance to go to Sitka and Juneau. It was about a month and a half ago. And I got some black seaweed. So there, you can buy a lot of different, you can buy nori, you can buy kombu, you can buy dulse, you can buy sea lettuce. Black seaweed is something that's really sacred to indigenous to Tlingit people. This is, I remember my great grandparents, you know, foraging it, getting it. And now, as you know, 200 years ago, even 100 years ago, a subsistence economy, now it's a cash economy. So I kind of look at this in twofold. As an indigenous chef, how do I represent my culture? I'm representing my culture with these items that I find, or that I have to buy from non-indigenous purveyors in Canada. But how come I can't support an indigenous purveyor in Alaska to do this? And you know, is there one that would be open to something like that? Chaga, if you look it up, it's like Chaga Bros. There's nobody indigenous offering chaga. So I guess I kind of look at it like, I personally feel like I want to empower indigenous people to create our food narrative. And if that means hands off black seaweed, don't touch the black seaweed, guys. There's a lot of stuff to get out of the sea. We don't have to all. Herring eggs, same thing. Unfortunately, these are from last season. I just saw the first season. The season is happening now. You can't, it's like maple syrup. The herring come when the herring come. So, you know, but again, like there's no domestic market for that. But some people are really offended with those little tins of herring brown. Because this is traditional food, this is sacred food. There's also, if you go, you know, I, as a Tlingit, can go and harvest herring eggs, and sometimes it becomes a hassle, but there's a Japanese, an Asian, like an out of country vendor that's got tonnage of it going overseas. So it's like, where's the right in that, and how do we get to tell our story? How do we get to prosper with our foods? And you're telling us not to gather our foods from our land, but another entity's coming in and taking tons of it and taking it to a different market across the globe. It doesn't seem right. That's where things like policy to me make a lot of sense to get involved with. And so, you know, I don't know what the end of that story is. I feel like you're always gonna, I'm just trying to do this the best I can. And like I said, I want to represent my culture with my food, and I want to do it in a respectful way. So that's how I look at it here. But then I came here, and like I said, I mean, Ramona Farms, you know, there's cholla buds and safari beans and these peas. Like, why can't I do that with traditional foods in Alaska? And why is it hands off or taboo, you know? But so there's a dialogue we had there. I just think that, again, like, our narrative has been given to us about foods. And now our narrative is like, oh, well, that's why traditional foods is fry bread. And, you know, Indian tacos, like, that's not what we ate all across Rhode Island 100 years ago, 200 years ago. So how's that for an answer? Great question, by the way, and it's something I don't like bringing up, it's something I personally, one thing I do love about being a part of. Natives is that I get to, I get to ride the coattails of Sean Sherman. And be on this platform and talk about this and have access to these conversations. I felt this way, but I never knew exactly how to bring it up prior, so. So. Actually, I want to make this I gotta slow this one right there. So the other thing, so I'm gonna do the vinaigrette, that's sidetracked. This is, I'm just doing this because I already cooked all the food, so you guys don't get to really watch me sear a piece of salmon. You're gonna watch me smoke this fish with this bougie little pan I got. This turns it on. Take this little guy here and you stick it in the place. Probably bringing up some bad decisions in the past. So we're either gonna be eating salmon or sitting outside looking at the fire department. It's gonna be funny either way though, guys. Yeah. And this is kind of cool. It's like, you put the feet in there. It's got a little fan, battery operated fan, pushing all the smoke right into here. Turn that off. Cover this for a minute. I think you guys can smell that. I'm gonna just put it over here.
I have a question.
Yep.
When you said you were in Oregon and you had the salmon on the
Cedar.
cedar, is that one of the traditional ones? But I know that like when I was visiting my friends in North Springs, they have like their huckleberry festival, and then they take the salmon and they cook it in a clay pot.
Okay.
With like birds inside the clay pot, like.
With birds.
No, like, so they do it basically the same way, they call it, like salmon clay pot, so they like.
Okay.
They make the salmon, but they also do birds the same way.
Oh,
And I was wondering, like, if you saw anything like.
I haven't seen anything like that. The gentleman that I'm working with, I'm gonna be going up there in April again. And it's kind of hard because they'd be happy with the same thing, but again, like I go up there to learn, I go up there to have fun, so it's like, how about sturgeon, or we might be getting some deer. I haven't seen anything like that, but that's not to say that I just, you know what I mean, like I haven't really cooked with a lot of traditional foods. Or that might be what people are doing on the coast and towards the inland, they're doing something else, That's the kind of, again, the rad part is like always looking at the difference of everything. So.
I can smell it, it smells good, but I'm like, oh wait, I can smell it.
So the salmon is smoking, we've got that going on. Oops.
Okay.
Oh, so that's why I was smelling too good. And then this is the vinaigrette, and so I'm gonna set this to the side. I've got so again, it's like 3-to-1, so I'm gonna basically just take this. Sometimes I'll put seaweed, or there's seaweed, spruce tip, cedar, lavender tea. So we're taking all of this and making a nice little thing. Sometimes I'll put hibiscus in there, again, vitamin C. Take a little bit of mustard. I'm working on a recipe. It's gonna be a video online here pretty soon, because I know I'm just throwing stuff in there. So it's probably about a teaspoon of mustard, a little bit of that, and probably like about the same amount of honey. And again, that could be agave, that could be maple syrup. 3-to-1 on the apple cider. Or just tasting it. And a lot of times, what I probably should have done or would do is actually add a little water to it. And that'll be fine because the liquid is just gonna neutralize the taste without it being too assertive on the tongue with the acid. So you could use, if you don't have one of these, you could take all of this, put it in a spice grinder and grind it up and have it the same way. But I just, I have this. You have a Vitamix or a blender at home, that would work too. But you could do this with a whisk if you just took a grinder and ground everything up and chopped it.
So I have a question.
Okay,
So, yeah, I learned how to make vinaigrettes like this watching a video from Jacques Papon. But would you be able to make a video like demonstrating how you make your vinaigrette?
I literally just did that. In the food lab, like.
Oh, yeah?
It's getting edited now.
Okay.
I have to send him the recipe, but so we have the actual ingredient list, but yeah. One thing again, like cooking, people, you do use your hands, but you also use your ears. When I'm doing this. As you kind of start adding the liquid, again, it's called an emulsion. Mayonnaise is an emulsion. If you took mayonnaise and froze it, the oil will go to the top, the goop will go to the bottom, and stuff will be in the middle. Same thing, a vinaigrette will break, the oil goes to the top, the vinegar drops to the bottom, all the filler, the flavoring will go to the middle. But it adds, you can hear as you're making the vinaigrette, you kind of hear the motor pump a little richer. And then I'm using my eyes and I can see it's kind of thick, like you get how nice and thick that is. Don't ever do that. All make a mess. All right, I'm gonna add this vinaigrette to this, just take it off the loose. So when I was in culinary school, I had instructors and they would, you cut vegetables, they'd show up with a ruler and measure your vegetables and yell because they're crooked. And your sauces would come out and they would be, they'd be broken. When you're making a mayonnaise or an aioli, that's a little different, but a vinaigrette, just shake it up again, it'll be fine. It's not the end of the world. You can take food in a lot of different directions and, and that said, food is for a lot of different directions. Sometimes you're having a 20-year anniversary, right? You want a special occasion. Sometimes it's Wednesday, you gotta feed 3 hungry kids. Like, it's just kind of what it is. So keep that in the context of that. This is a great, like I said, I kind of propose this in a way where you can have this available 3 days a week. It's good, it's healthy, and you can make it how you want to make it if you have dietary restrictions or concerns. Okay, so no fire alarm, got that going for us.
So how do you want to have people line up for it?
I'm thinking, if you don't mind, we'll just put a couple of these together and you can pass it out.
Okay, perfect.
So, as we're doing that, I'll talk about the beans that I made, but I've got this little piece of salmon, we're gonna drop this on one side, so I've got the, kind of the desert friends over here on one side, I've got the salmon, we're gonna drop a little vinaigrette on it. And then I've got herring eggs and black seaweed, so y'all are welcome to eat as much or as little as you like.
And just a quick question, who needs to leave now? I'll try to pass to you guys first, because I want to respect your time, I know we're over time right now. So if anybody needs to go head off for lunch, just let me know, and I'll come bring you the food first. Great. Perfect.
And then, again, so I got a chance to also learn because, my new friend Will here loaned me a hot pot.